So welcome to my channel. This is Haddad Mileto. Welcome to my channel that is called the Watcher Forums. Okay, we're gonna have to deal with a few forms of communication on this broadcast. What we have to understand is that the history of the Watcher Forums goes back, I would say, about 8 years. Right now I'm 27. I'm gonna be 28 July 14th. The history of the Watcher Forums goes back to, I started the channel The Watcher Forums when I was 19, okay, when I was away at college in upstate. Alright, so what I'm going to call this current video right here, this video is going to be a revamp, okay, because I did a bunch of rituals, right? The history of this channel, right, I don't really have much up right now, but there used to be a whole lot of things going on in the Watcher Forums. Right now there's nothing. Right, there's videos of like animals and stuff. So the history of this channel is very old, right? I've probably been through, I would say, maybe a few hundred videos that I don't have up right now. I'd say I've been through about a few hundred videos that are deleted or gone because when I do things, I do rituals and then I change things up, right? And my skin sheds, you understand, and I get a new body, right? Same thing with my channel, right? So I'm gonna call this a revamp because there was two huge events, there was two huge rituals that I did, that I'm gonna have to complete maybe within the next few months. I'm gonna complete one of these rituals, which I'm going to refer to as the Rakabaramil's Falta ritual. Now, the term Falta is interesting. It stands for lack, right? And you have fault, right? Because we have these at-fault systems. Not only that, we have agendas dealing with fallen angels that are humanity's fault, right? And how is that? So the term fault is important, but you have to understand sometimes it's important to wait for people to be at fault, right? Because then we have all different types of affiliations in the country, you understand? But my understanding is these Anunnakis, okay? Because this is what we're going to deal with. We're going to deal with the history of the Anunnakis influencing humanity, and a lot of people have no idea what these Anunnakis really are. A lot of human ancestors, they survived the flood and landed in places like Asia Minor and Ionia and Anatolia, and they started dealing with these Anunnakis, these fallen angels, and then all different types of agendas. They became involved in agreements with them, you understand? It seems like these Anunnakis are in charge of, to many different extents, of the whole concept of the Matrix. And when we deal with the concept of the Matrix, because I'm going to bring up a little bit about these Anunnakis and my understanding of it. Before that, though, because that goes back a long time, we refer to as Anunnakis as fallen elves, okay? That's not going to work. But viruses, we'll get to it, right? we refer to these Anunnakis as fallen elves because there's Elohim, okay? Ancient Jewish mysticism, they refer to the elves, the Elohim, okay? And all the different word roots of El is so vast. You understand? I'm gonna go into, I'll do that another time. So there's fallen elves. Think about angels, fallen angels. Okay, ends and L's, right? Angels, fallen angels, right? So what we're dealing with fallen elves that we actually refer to as Anunnaki. So there's Elohim, and then unfortunately it's made to look like Jews are descended from these Elohim, okay? And they have fallen counterparts. The Elohim they're descended from or have fallen counterparts. And it looks like they're opposite halves, right? There's so much of this, okay, right? In the universe, there's so much of it. You understand that there's the fallen counterparts of the Elohim Jews are descended from. We're referring to as not only fallen elves, but we're referring to them as Anunnakis, and they have a very ancient history. And I kind of mentioned affiliations a little bit. Well, the Anunnakis can be in charge of a whole lot of things since the times of, let's say, Samaria, you understand? But then a lot of people of black descent become involved with Anunnakis. We're going to explain a little bit about what Anunnakis even are, but one of those Anunnakis, okay, and there's more sensitive terms for the Anunnakis, right? Ears, okay? Erdem is ancient Aramaic, in a sense. You have ears, the eardom, you understand? And that's why, because they're watchers, Anunnaki are watchers, right? Well, this is the watcher forms. Well, the ears and the eardom, because ears, it's interesting because the term is connected to the English term ear, right? You understand? So you understand when you do an eardom in singular in Aramaic, ears. You understand? Is ancient Iranian, ancient Aramaic for watchers, right? You understand? So what we're understanding is Fonels, Anunnakis, and watchers are the same thing. Araka Bardamil just happens to be one of these Anunnakis. You understand? The surviving lineages of the flood. So this is one of the rituals that I just did recently, and it has to do with the spirit of the 19th moon, one of the ancient kings from Byblos, okay, which currently we're referring to as Hadad. This guy right here, that's a guy named Hadad from Reno, okay. That's Hadad from Reno, and the reason why that's Hadad from Reno, we got a king from Byblos, Rib Hadad. Now, why is his name Rippada? Well, there's a few reasons why his name's Rippada. I don't really like going. I'm not going into. I don't want to go into this second, but it's actually the same roots of Caribbean, and it has serpent connotation. Okay, you got a bunch of royals, Amu Kardib, in the sand of Arabian dynasties. They have this Kardib, okay? And if you look up Amu Kardib or Ami Kardib, you're gonna find references to ancient Arabian dynasties, okay? So, but the term Rib has serpent connotation. It's actually where we get Caribbean. All right, but Rib Hadad was one of the ancient kings from Byblos, right? So we're dealing with this kind of Levantine area, Byblos, Tyre, and Phoenicia, and places like Sidon. And what's happening is there's ancient god king traditions coming out of these areas. They're dealing with, guess what? Probably dealing with Anunnakis. All right. So this virus quarantine we're going to get to, because the whole planet seems to have been quarantined since the flood, and it looks like a lot of these ancestors are dealing with agreements with these Anunnakis after the flood. They're dealing with agreements with a lot of these fallen angels. One of those Anunnakis, okay, is known as Araka Barmil, okay, which seems to be, to my understanding, a draconic deity of the Lucifuge. Okay, loose in the world, right? Lucifuge, wouldn't know anything about the Luciferian agenda, wasn't for the Lucifuge. A lot of members of the human race that are connected to, let's say, the Elohim, many times involved in agreements with these Anunnakis that have a Luciferian agenda in the Matrix. You understand? But if you actually research the Matrix, this is what's interesting. Let's understand that the demiurge and archons and Gnosticism, you understand? So now we go into Gnosticism. A lot of people don't really know what the Gnostics really believed. Okay, very ancient forms of Christianity. To my understanding, archons are a bunch of insects. They're hovering around in the the paraphysical multiverse. Okay, and they're capturing all these angelic races from Pleroma, and they're trapping them into the physical worlds. Okay, Talos. Okay, and then they're modifying them and trapping them into the physical worlds. That's then consequently controlled by a very arrogant force known as the demiurge. Demiurge is Greek for create. So they're definitely powerful and they can create realities, but they start manipulating realities because these archons, to my understanding, are a bunch of insects. So then we're dealing with this ancient demiurge still, of ancient Gnosticism. Okay, and the head of the demiurge, according to the Gnostics, but keep in mind, that's an ancient form of Christianity. And you have to understand the Gnostics were persecuted, they were hunted down. A lot of ancient peoples all over the ancient Mediterranean, they were targeted, and they were massacred many times because they're maintaining a very ancient gnosis, right? That's the whole concept of Gnosticism. It's where we get the English term knowledge, very ancient Greek term gnosis, right? And we have to understand gnosis is esoteric as opposed to exoteric. Okay, there's gnosis, right? Well, to my understanding, this is where it clicks though, because the head of the demiurge, according to the Gnostics, is guess what? Jehovah. Okay, Jehovah, right? Which is actually the God in our Orthodox Abrahamic system. Okay, you're gonna have Jehovah, and Jehovah is also known as Adonai. So now we're dealing with the ancient Hebrew tradition, right? Because that goes into Yahweh, that goes into Adonai, that goes into Metatron, that goes into the concept of the rulers of the human race, the priests, the pharaohs, the god kings, the royals. A lot of times they're in cahoots with deities directly, but monotheistically speaking specifically, because now we're dealing with the monarchs and kings that are ruling humanity with one God through monotheism. Okay, and when we're dealing with monotheism, it's kind of a Luciferian slant that there's one pharaoh, you understand, one king, and he deals with God, and then he controls the whole civilization. He controls the whole human race, right? Or whatever ancient society that he was the king of, right? So the Orthodox Abrahamic system is actually controlled, according to the ancient Gnostics, by Jehovah, Adonai, Yahweh, whatever you want to call him. And Jehovah is the head, and that's aka Yaldabaoth. Okay, now the reason why it's pronounced Yaldabaoth, a lot of people pronounce Yaldabaoth as Yaldabaoth. The reason why Yaldabaoth is because in Greek, archons means authorities, right? Yaldabaoth, authorities, authors. All right. So the Orthodox Abrahamic system, this is a very arrogant, punitive demiurge that controls the physical universe. All right, according to ancient Gnosticism, and the god of that demiurge is Yaldabaoth, and Yaldabaoth is the same as Jehovah, the head of the Orthodox Abrahamic system, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. I would even say Allah, okay, because that's the same kind of concept of one God ruled monotheistic ancient tradition coming from kind of I would say solar cults out of Egypt and the Mediterranean. I would say Egypt and the Levant. They have ancient solar cults and they have God King traditions with a Luciferian slant, which is mostly monotheistic, and that goes hand in hand with our understanding of Orthodox Abrahamic monotheism and religion, Orthodox religion with one God rulership, as opposed to the Hindu understandings. For example, if there's so many deities and in ancient Gnosticism, they have a lot of different types of angelic beings from Pleroma, which would be ancient Greek for heaven, Pleroma. Right, so let's set aside, because these Anunnakis are then controlling the matrix with a Luciferian agenda, but we have to understand there's certain things going on with what types of fallen angelic deities, what types of gods may even control the matrix. All right, and what the hell are these Anunnakis to begin with? But that's kind of a side note. Araka Bartamil, one of the Anunnakis, okay? These ancestors, they're going to survive the flood, right? They're going to land in a place called Ionia, right? And there's a few things hidden in Ionia, right? All lead up to Ionia, and that's according to the book of Genesis. Now, if you read through Genesis, you'll find one of the quotes. I actually can't find it, okay? But it is, because Javan, well, the verb proves that the word Ionia is the derivation of Javan. They're actually, this one quote, it's like saying Ionia and Javan, similar connotation. Greek tradition traces the ancestry back to Japhethos, who was Japheth. So the Japhethites, so Noah's son is Japheth, the survivors of the flood, right? Because there's the pre-Diluvian timelines. And what happened in the Hyperborea and Lemuria and Atlantis before the flood, after the flood, ancestors survived that, whatever that cataclysm was about, because then they kind of say that Jehovah caused the flood to rid the earth of the Nephilim. But honestly, my understanding, it sounds like the Nephilim may have took over after the flood, okay? And that's a big bone of contention in the alternative research world. Maybe it's the Nephilim that seem to be very present. Ironically, in all these different ancestral traditions, we see them after the flood all over the Mediterranean, we're all over Egypt and the Levant, we're going to have references to the Nephilim after the flood. It's like, well, didn't Jehovah cause the flood to get rid of the earth? No, we're just referring to Jehovah as Yaldabaoth, head of the archons of the demiurge of ancient Gnostics. So let's see. Raka Baramiel is one of the Anunnakis, right? Now, what we have to understand is it's the ancestors that survived the flood that landed in Ionia, okay? That are involved in agreements with the so-called Anunnakis. Now, the Anunnakis start manipulating timelines, is what Anunnakis is known for. Now, what we have to understand is we refer to a few quotes because before Araka Barmiel's Falted ritual, okay, dealing with Ripada came from Velos and the spirit of the 19th moon. Before that ritual, I did another ritual that was the knowledge of the mushroom ritual, right? Where I transformed a really negative poem to a really positive poem. And I also explained all these other forms of Kabbalistic knowledge about transforming all these forms of negativity to all these forms of positivity, understanding that's kind of the setup, alchemically speaking, hermetically speaking, in the universe. There's so much of this, right? So sometimes we have to work with that. Because whatever the setup that the Anunnakis actually even have with this, you understand? Because there's a they're fallen from the Elohim, right? So there's like a whole thing going on here, understand? With full conflicts, right? There's all different types of dichotomies. Okay, so what we have to understand is the very human beings that survived the flood, they land in Ionia, they start dealing with agreements with the fallen angels, right? So before we get into Araka Barmiel's Falted ritual, before the knowledge of the mushroom ritual, we're gonna revamp, all right? We're gonna explain a little bit because the type of information I'm dealing with here is before the flood there was Hyperborea, the pre-Diluvian advanced civilizations. Okay, before the flood there was Hyperborea, there was Atlantis. And there was also another place called Lemuria or Mu, you understand? But then after the flood, they're surviving. They're ending up in certain locations, such as Ionia. Ionians are Greeks. Japheth, his descendants might be the Ionians. And Japheth is once again the son of Noah. So then they're landing in Ionia after they survive the flood. Noah survives the flood. Japheth, Noah's son, Japheth's three sons, Madai, Gomer, and Magog. They're surviving the flood. They're landing in about Asia Minor. And then we have what is known as the Table of Nations. Ancient Jewish scholars, they know about the Table of Nations. And these survivors of the flood, they're landing in places like Asia Minor, and then they're dispersing to as far as the Indus Valley. All right? Javan, you got Ionians. Those nations descend from Java. You have these Medes, and all the different forms of communication dealing with Medes, ancient kind of black magician types, I would say, probably dealing with the same kind of fallen angels, whatever agendas, as that is carried out nowadays in this timeline. There's a lot of timelines merging, or we could be under attack from ancient timelines. You understand? How about that? You understand, right? These black magicians from other timelines can be attacking our timeline. You understand, right? And one of the ways that they be doing that is through the media. You understand, right? So a lot of these Luciferians are actually carrying out agendas from ancient kind of black magician adepts dealing with fallen angels from other timelines to the modern media, and that's actually what we call the Luciferian agenda. All right, that's what we call the Luciferian agenda. They're hiding all these forms of Luciferianism now through all these forms of media is what's happening. What Luciferian actually even is, we're going to kind of have to explain that maybe another time. But this video is important because before all of this stuff that happened, with this knowledge, this ritual, and then this ritual, before we did those two rituals, right? We were still dealing with the Washer Forums, which is this YouTube channel, and we were dealing with all these different forms of communication about the ancient history of the survivors of the flood that are known as Japhethites landing in Ionia. And once again, the capital of Ionia is a place called Miletus. All right. Now this is a very important place right here. All right. Ionia, the capital of Ionia. Right. Think about the term Ionia. Is Miletos. Okay. And then where you get the term, the name Miletos is going to obviously come from ancient peoples and it's the Milesians. Now let's go right into the Hyksos pharaohs of Egypt. Bam. Hyksos pharaohs of Egypt. Akhenaten. Everyone knows about Akhenaten. One of the pharaohs of Egypt's daughter, Skota, okay, marries King Mil. So then you have the sons of Mil. Then you have Mil Espan. Okay, Mil Espan means soldier from Spain, and it's the same roots as military, actually, or militia. You understand? So you have Akhenat's daughter Skota. Akhenat's a pharaoh of Egypt. What's actually happening is then we refer to these Hyksos people as actually another term for them is going to be Amalekites. And Amalekites dealing with a bunch of different things. I would actually refer to once again as a situation where they do Moloch worship. You understand? The Amalekites aren't all bad. They're not all good. But they're kind of, in my readings, okay, they have what is known as the Draconian seed, which is against the Evadamic seed, the real human guardian heritage is going to be Evadamic, and then the human beings that are related to kind of the fallen angels or the alien enemies, because there's difference between Draconians and Anunnaki. The Draconians are more so warriors. When they gave a lot of human beings Draconian seed, they are what is known as Amalekites. This is my reading, okay, and this is going to be once again a contention. You understand? I would love to debate. There's a lot more that goes into this. But what we have to understand is we're going right from the survivors of the flood right to Ionia to a place called Miletos. And Miletos is also a town in Italy, Mileto. Okay, but what we have to understand, it goes to ancient people known as Milesians. And in the ancient Irish annals, the Milesians invaded Ireland from Spain. Okay, so the Milesians invade Ireland from Spain, and they caused all these issues and problems. When they invaded Ireland, and I would say that they were attacking the Druids. You understand? So what we have to understand is that the history of the Milesians, and then we have another note, which would be Milesian genealogies, which goes back to ancient Spanish kings, ancient Irish kings. But what we have to understand is what are they doing in Miletus, if Miletus is in Asia Minor? Well, the quote from Genesis refers to the survivors of the flood landed in Ionia. But that's because that's Japheth. Well, Japheth's sister, Keser, Noah's daughter, landed in Ireland, right? So it's looking like the survivors of this flood from Atlantis, from Iberia, and all of Europe, looks like they landed in either Ireland or Ionia, okay, Asia Minor, give or take. So there's still going to be a connection here between the ancient ancestors from Ireland and the ancient ancestors from Asia Minor. There's still going to be a connection between those two places. Okay, and it's almost looking like the very ancient, the Phoenician race itself. You understand? A lot of people definitely know this nowadays, that the Phoenician race itself possibly has a Gaelic origins. Alright, and there's so much this goes into of the history of these different types of peoples that I'm going to say are kind of descending from Atlanteans. Alright, so it looks like they're going to survive the flood. They're going to land in a place called Asia Minor. Now, what we have to understand is that goes right into the Hyksos pharaohs of ancient Egypt. Okay, they survived the flood. These, and the last name Miletos goes into the Milesians. The Milesians held high office in terms of the Hyksos nobility in ancient Egypt, Kemet, Masur, okay, lands of Ham, all the different terms for ancient Egypt. Seeing Egypt kind of connotes the Aegean Sea, and there's another term, Egokeros, which is a Greek term that means goat, right? So they're kind of like related to the Goths, I would say, a little bit at the same time. You understand? What we have to understand is that Egypt, also known as Kemet, is an alchemist. Alchemy and then chemistry and Kemet, all these different words. What we have to understand is that Egypt, these ancient Hyksos pharaohs, so the very pharaohs of Egypt, okay, have connections to Milesians. Okay, is the idea. And this is something that we can research a little bit more. But the very pharaoh of Egypt, Akhenaten, his daughter Skota, as in Scotland, marries King Neil, which is a Spanish king. One of the kings from Spain is King Neil. And you have the sons of Neil, and then once again, Neil in Spain means soldiers from Spain. So, right into Hyksos pharaohs, okay, of ancient Egypt. Right from Miletos, right from the Milesians of Ionia, right from the survivors of the flood, and then the whole concept of when we're dealing with the Anunnakis, because now we're dealing with a guardian heritage coming from the ancient Asia Minor, coming from ancient Middle East, dealing with surviving the ages of the flood. What's happening is, and then we're going to refer to this quote, all this information, Dark Forces, the Anunnakis, and the Milesians, replaced our true heritage, the story. So these Milesians once again invaded Ireland. Okay, keep that in mind. And they're foreigners. They're involved in the Hyksos nobility of ancient Egypt, which is the pharaonic lineages. They're ending up all over the Mediterranean. They're related to all these different types of people. And the ancient outpost Miletus, we can reference one of the philosophers known as Thales. Now, Thales is one of the philosophers of ancient Miletus. A Milesian philosopher. There was a Milesian school of thought. There's so much that goes into even researching Milesian genealogies once again. The ancient Milesian heritage, and they descend directly from Hyperboreans, which is another term for ancient Atlantis. So the theory is they came from Hyperborea, they survived the flood, Ireland and Ionia, and whatever they're dealing with, maybe agreements with fallen angels, because what happened is it looks like, I would say the Anunnaki and Milesians possibly had agendas starting back in the day. Many thousands of years ago, these Anunnakis and Milesians had agendas. Well, we have a few other concepts here. I have another quote. Okay. Now check this out, because we're dealing with what is that, right? What do you mean? There was a global cataclysm that blew up Hyperborea. This whatever the flood is, because then there's so many different theories about it. Went into it, the whole Jehovah idea. It looks like okay, 25,500 years ago was our last chance at stellar activation. Who cares? When a race called Anunnaki invaded Ionia, okay, and placed the Nibiru crystals for control. Who cares? You understand? But what the hell is going on with Anunnaki now and this place called Ionia and the survivors of the flood that landed in Ionia, right? Because now, and then what even are these Anunnakis? Because now we're having a problem here. We're having a problem with fallen angelic covenants and whatever it is, causing a contrivance, a global cataclysm, possibly. And it looks like after they blew the planet up, they consolidated dominion over the earth and the peoples on the planet, dealing with an agenda. So now a lot of human ancestors coming out of ancient Asia Minor and the Middle East, never mind specific God King traditions that are dealing with these fallen angels, right? These gods, okay? They start getting involved in agreements many times with what is known as Anunnaki, okay? That seem to have been having wars with guardians before the flood with ancestors for stargates, okay, which has to do with humanity's ability to ascend. Now, in the alternative research communities in the world, the alternative research communities, you're going to get ascension forms, okay, right? And you're going to research about star seeds, crystal healers. You're going to research about all this bullshit, right? About humanity's ascension, though, and sometimes you get really good information. A lot of times you get charlatanry, I guess. You get a lot of BS. But what's actually happening is in the alternative research communities, we're getting ascension forms, and this is a good example of a type of information you're going to find in these alternative research forums. And we're also dealing with, concepts like galactic history, timelines, reference Lyrans versus Draconians. This is a good start, but also reference Pleiadians versus Reptilians. Okay, there's no doubt there's scale deity races in the multiverse. There's no doubt there's draconic deities. There's no doubt there's benign servant races. You understand? Because once again, I deal with all different types of entities. You understand? Like I love dealing with animals a lot. I like communicating with animals a lot. You understand? But what the ancient spiritualists, they're always trying to classify the angelic kingdoms. They're trying to deal with and channel and communicate with all different types of entities in the multiverse. All right, and there's no doubt there's advanced draconic deities. Okay, but what's happening is we can do some research in terms of the galactic history timelines. And then we're going to want to do some research in terms of the pre-Diluvian timelines. Because after all that, okay, and then all this, and then the human galactic seed, it's kind of understood comes from other locations, other localities across the multiverse and the universe. You're going to get, I believe that there was timelines where humans were having wars, where like 18-foot tall humans were having wars with 18-foot tall draconians, you understand? In terms of the galactic history timelines, you're going to get a lot of information that's not in your history class, okay, right? You're going to get a bunch of type of information that is very unfamiliar, because they're dealing with forms of communication coming from whatever events from distant timelines. I would even say way before the flood, possibly the star systems, right? This whole history between the Lyrans versus the Draconians. That's a tidbit of the galactic history timelines where human ancestors were having wars with draconians or some bullshit like that. That comes up in the alternative research communities, and that's a good example of it. And then we're dealing with the pre-Diluvian timelines. So before the flood, humanity so-called recrudescens in Central Asia and Asia Minor, and they have all different types of traditions. What's happening is they're being impacted by fallen angels. What's happening, their traditions is being many times getting taken over by all different types of entities, of deities, and gods, whatever it is. So then we're dealing with the pre-Diluvian timelines before the flood and then after the flood. Okay, those are very important concepts there. And I'm even trying to say even goes back to humans missing from other star systems and stuff. You know? So this is a side note. What the hell these Anunnakis doing now? Invading Ionia. Okay, survivors of the flood, having wars for the Stargates, all this other BS. And then when the Anunnakis kind of win those wars for those Stargates, they start manipulating timelines however they want to manipulate timelines. And keep in mind, Anunnakis are basically fallen elves that are the fallen versions of the Jews' heritage from the ascended Elohim, right? And they kind of manipulate the matrices, because what happened with this is branches of Elohim races split, right? So you're gonna have this happen. You have whole races of ascended angels that humans could be descended from. Then you're gonna have whole different types of races called the fallen angels. And then when you research the fallen angels, that's what that is. They are a bunch of entities that many times hover around in logos. Okay, they hover around in logos, the multiverse, and then they manipulate talos because they're fallen, right? So they want to manipulate the hell out of the physical universe. A lot of fallen angels, a lot of people understand the concept that fallen angels are then manipulating the physical universe, okay? Or they're manipulating the human matrix world. They're manipulating the matrix. A lot of human beings, once again, they deal with a Luciferian agenda. You understand? They're dealing with fallen angels, and they have a Luciferian agenda dealing with how they want to own and control the matrix. And many times, once again, to my understanding, has to do with just programming all different forms of media, right? That's kind of what basically entails the majority of the so-called Luciferian agenda. And what Luciferian actually is keeping Anunnakis kind of occupied, I guess, is the main definition of Luciferianism. You understand when it really comes down to it. So there's a few little things going on there. You understand, right? That I have to note, because before these two rituals, that's the type of information I dealt with. Okay, what the heck is going on with these ancient Milesians? They're surviving. They're descending from Hyperboreans. They're dealing with Anunnakis, and they're descending from the so-called Atlanteans that are surviving on the flood and landing in places like Ionia. And then another thing going on, because the Milesians, as in Miletos, this should give you a little bit of a hint. There's so many different forms of communication. Once again, like Thales in Miletus is a philosopher. Well, I'm just going to go right into it, because this is what starts happening when those fallen angelic deities kind of beat the human guardians for the stargates. Because now we're dealing with specific surviving lineages of the flood that landed in certain places, that dealing with agreements with fallen angels, because they lost the wars for stargates, right? And when the human guardians lose wars for the stargates, to get the fuck off of the planet, to get through the stargates, to get to Logos, but locked, everything's locked. We're dealing with Star Miletos once again. We're dealing with forms of communication. The last name Miletus, the last name Miletos. They're dealing with, we have a video game, right, called Fire Emblem. Who knows about the Game Boy video game Fire Emblem, right? Well, in the Game Boy game Fire Emblem, they're dealing with a dark deity known as Loptus. And this is what's starting to happen. They survive the flood, and they land in a place like Miletos. And they start dealing with dark deities, and this is coming up in a video game now for the fucking kids, right? But if you actually research what the hell Loptus is all about, you know, it's a no-brainer. You understand that shouldn't be a video game for kids, right? So what's happening is Lopt, because now we're dealing with Norse forms of communication, all this concept of Logos, well, you have Loki. Right? So when you're dealing with locals, we're trying to get to those locals, right? Well, unfortunately, trying to get to those locals can be kind of tough sometimes, because you're dealing with trickster deities that hide out, hang out right in those in-between realms, right? In between locas and talas, in between the multiverse and the universe, in between the spirit world and the physical world. The portals that link those things, right? The portals that would link this physical world to the so-called spirit world or the astral world, you're going to have portals. None of that. You're going to have dark deities that are warring for being in control over those portals. Okay, because once they can beat the human guardians for the wars for the stargates, they can start manipulating the human race and controlling the human race, and then manipulating timelines however they want. Right? So now we're dealing with tricksters like Loki. They're fooling around with the Logos, or now access to those Logos. Right? Is what's happening. And then remember we brought up the Amalekites, and they're dealing with the deity Moloch once again, right? Well, Loki in Norse is Lopt. Okay, so Lopt, as in the ancient religion, it comes up in this video game. Lopterian, the Lopterian religion. All right, and the Lopterian religion is known for, well, just research, okay, because it's not good. They're dealing with dark deities. Well, there it is. So they try to Loptus, right? And Lopt is Norse for Loki. Okay, so you see all these different connections. You know, and Elohim is also known as Elohim. Elohim is Greek. Elohim, we're talking about the Elohim. Well, in Greek, it's Elohim. You know why? Because they're from the Elohim are from Logos, which is Sanskrit. Now, the term Logos is Sanskrit for astral worlds. All right. So we're dealing with Elohim from Logos, and it's almost looking like in those same Logos, those astral worlds. Guess what's happening? We're dealing with all these deities, all these fallen angelic deities. Their fallen counterparts, because the Elohim branches, the Elohim race is split. That thumbs up, that thumbs down. This is why I did before this, and we're gonna get into what this is, okay? Because once again, I did 2 enormous rituals, and I'm doing this revamp. The type of information I dealt with before these 2 enormous rituals, because then even after these 2 enormous rituals, I took a big break, right? So I'm doing a revamp of the type of information that I used to deal with. Well. So what's happening is this concept right here. So that because the Elohim seems to be from the Logos Elohim. And it looks like one of the fallen elves, how about that, would kind of be Loftus, okay? in a way, because then we're dealing with these dark ancient deities that I'm also going to refer to as fallen angels, obviously. And I'm going to say that a lot of these draconic deities, they kind of have kinship with a lot of the dragon races. So when you research what Loftus is, you're going to get, it was like a fire dragon. Is this thing out Loftus was like a fire dragon or something like that, or earth dragon. Okay, in that event where they offered all the youth up in ancient Miletus, they offered all the youth up to the empire's dark god known as Loftus. Okay, that event is referred to in this game called Fire Emblem. They refer to that as the Sorrow of Miletus. Okay, where it looks like they're dealing with dark deities that are taking over their access to the portals, right? And then they're trapping this portion of the human race, possibly the very survivors of the flood. Actually, they're trapping them, and then manipulating timelines, right? As if time's running out, you know? So as if we can't even have our own timeline. How about that, right? That's kind of how a lot of these fallen angels kind of look at it. So this is what is known as the Lofterian cult, okay? And it comes up in a video game, a Game Boy game for kids, ironically. Understand? So when I'm saying these concepts of the Milesians and the ancient place Miletus, there's a lot of different things that goes. It goes right into the pharaonic lineages of Egypt, goes right into the very survivors of the flood, and it goes into a lot of other different things like the philosopher Thales of Miletus. And then the ancient Milesians in Irish annals are once again invading Ireland from Spain. The very Milesians that invaded Ireland from Spain, they were known that Spain was referred to as the land of the dead, because that's where these Milesians came from, and the Milesians were, I want to say, a little bit on the more barbaric side in a way, but that's what this quote's referring to as the dark forces of the Anunnaki and the Milesians. So the Milesians seem to be dealing with these Anunnakis, right? Replace our true heritage and story, something like that. They took them over. The Anunnakis and the Milesians came and took them over. This is what this quote's referring to. And this is whatever type of information. Once again, the whole Atlanteans and the Druids, the evil dark forces of the Anunnaki and the Milesians is the quote. Let's see what else we got. That's pretty much it. So keep in mind, key little points there. Big points though. You understand? Because we're dealing with Okay, so these two rituals that we're doing now, let's understand the type of information I was dealing with though before these two enormous rituals that I did. Since I was 19, in the Washer forums, I sort of dealt with those kind of concepts and all the different places they kind of ended up and all their traditions, right? Now, what we have to understand is because then I did two enormous rituals, right? I did a knowledge of the mushroom ritual where I explained, because we're dealing with this, right? So I can transform a really negative poem to a really positive poem very easily. That was my knowledge of mushroom ritual. But I can't transform bad people in the world to good people, right? That was basically the summation of the ritual. And then after that, and we did a whole lot of teaching videos about that information, about how we can, because it's the mushroom. The mushroom takes decay, right? We have to do this on multiple levels of our existence. Mushroom takes the decay from the earth and it transforms it to life, mushrooms, right? But it needs decaying organic material, mushrooms, to process that negativity, and it transforms it to life, blood filled, fleshy bodies known as mushrooms, all right? Now, a lot of mushrooms are medicinal, but specifically, we're dealing with the concept of these mushrooms growing from bull dung, and we refer to those mushrooms as psilocybin, right? Which is entheogenic, which is a very important medicine. You understand, right? So the mushrooms that grow from the bull dung, that's psilocybin. But what's happening is that entheogen actually helps us face all our negativity and process our negativity on a very deep energetic level and transform that to positivity. Okay, is what mushrooms do, and that's what the knowledge of mushroom ritual is about. How I can not only transform a negative poem to a positive poem, I can't even make that positive poem that positive if I didn't have the negative poem. So we have to then face the shadow, right? We have to go into the dark night of the soul, right? We have to do the underworld rituals. We have to go into the caves, and we have to kill the dragon, right? We have to face the demons, right? We can't just keep ignoring, because then it'll build up, right? The garden will build up with weeds, right? That was a knowledge of the mushroom, that we have to kind of face the darker side in the human race many times. Not everyone's a shaman, right? Not everyone has the shamanistic authority even to even be able to do that, right? To face the darker side and process the negativity and transform it to positivity. Not everybody has the will to even want to do that, right? So a lot of times in society, we're going to have all different types of negatives that we're going to have to face. We're going to have to root that out. We're going to have to transform to all different types of positives, sociologically, yeah. But we also have to do that psychologically, emotionally. We have to do that in our families. We have to do that. Any form of negativity, we have to be able to face it. In health, okay, we have health problems. We have to root that out, and then we have to transform our health to better states. Do you understand? But if we're not rooting that out apophatically, right? If we're not rooting that out apophatically, those negatives are going to build up. We're going to develop diseases that are going to be more prone to illness. We're going to be more susceptible to things like viruses. So we have to be able to root out the negatives and transform them to positives. But there are so many different things that goes into. Okay, there's so many different ways to look at that, transforming negativity to positivity, and it's perfectly symbolized by the mushroom. Okay, negativity to positivity, and I even have that negative poem, and then I transformed it to a positive poem. And the whole idea is I wrote a very positive poem, but it wouldn't be anywhere close, yeah, to how positive. You understand? We have to face the darker side. That's the knowledge of mushroom. And then the lighter side comes. We have to be able to, after the storm, okay? The storm happens, you understand, right? And then the beautiful blossoms of spring come, okay? After the storm happens, though, we have to face that storm and then the beauty comes through the clouds. Okay, we have to face the shadow. You know what I'm saying? And that's actually very psychological too, because now we're dealing with facing the repressed content of our psyches. Okay, we're dealing with the concept of repression now. We have to actually root out past life traumas. We're dealing with now, right? We have to root out our repressions from childhood. We have to root out the repressed content of our psyches can be from other versions of ourselves in other lifetimes, you know what I'm saying? The repressed content of our psyche, we have to root out the traumas, right? And then once we can face those traumas, we can then basically awaken other parts of ourselves, is what starts happening. But without that apophatic, which actually can many times look negative, right? If I'm trying to face that negative poem and process it, that looks negative. What I'm actually doing is I'm facing that shadow, right? Because then we have the shadow self in psychology, right? We have to face our shadow self. And we have to face the shadow and then transform that to light. And that's Kabbalistic, right? That comes up in all different forms of alchemy and hermeticism. There's going to be so much of this, okay? And that's the knowledge of the mushroom ritual in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it. You know, they have to go get the people doing the drugs, shipping the drugs in and all this other shit to get the drugs off the streets. You understand, right? Or even people have to go be sober. They have to go in that long process of becoming sober from being addicted to whatever substances, right? Because we have a lot of substance abuse in the world, and what is actually that? Escapism from facing the shadow, escapism from facing the repressed content of our psyches, which is many times traumatic, understand? But we start giving away parts of ourselves if we don't face those scars. You understand, right? So this is kind of, I went into a lot of shamanistic healing knowledge and wisdom and gnosis in the so-called knowledge of the mushroom ritual. And then Araka Bartamil came in, okay, and comes in Araka Bartamil came in with what is referred to as Araka Bartamil's Falta ritual. This knowledge of the mushroom ritual concept. Then the ascended elves and fallen elves can manipulate the matrix, and then they have accountabilities. You understand? And humanity sources. You understand, right? And there's all these full conflicts. You understand, right? And it has a lot to do with how these fallen angels are in control over the matrix. You understand, right? And there's a lot more to that. But what's happening is, after this knowledge of the mushroom ritual, I guess what are we trying to say? We couldn't handle the knowledge of the mushroom ritual, and what happened was we started dealing with an agenda from one of the Anunnakis known as Rakabar. Okay, right? So now we have an agenda that happened. One of these Anunnakis known as Rakabar. And then Arakabar, there's a few other terms. This is a king from Byblos. Which is this guy? This is Hadar from Reno, okay? That's Hadar from Reno, okay? And he was involved with what is known as the Rakabar Mil's Falta ritual. And he's the Reep Hadar once again from Byblos. Okay? What happened is that king from Byblos is done with one of these goddamn Anunnakis, right? That designed a whole bullshit ritual that came in after the whole concept of we couldn't handle the human race or the humanity, or whatever the hell, couldn't handle the knowledge of the mushroom ritual. So one of these Anunnakis co-opted that, because what's happening is, if we can't face the shadow networks in the country, right, that are manipulating the human race, that are manipulating our country, that are manipulating the planet from behind the government, right? There's shadow networks and him. If we can't root those people out, that are causing all these issues and problems. Let's say they made it created a virus. You understand, right? We can't root those people out. They are loose in our world, and they're creating all these issues and problems. They're loose in the world, and they're creating all these problems. One of those problems could have been a virus. All right, because what's happening is Rockabarmil's Faulty Ritual has to do with COVID. Rockabarmil's Faulty Ritual has to do with what is known as the Moloch Network. Rockabarmil's Faulty Ritual has to do with a whole lot of stuff, but we haven't completed this. We haven't completed this ritual. I have to complete that ritual, which is going to be probably in the next few months. But we have to understand what happened here first, because we have to explain the type of information I dealt with before all this. Because I started on YouTube when I was 19, dealing with just my heritage. Because even though I was born Jameis Mileto, I got changed to Ross, right? So even though my name's Jameis Ross, I was born Jameis Corey Mileto. And I got changed to Jameis Jordan Ross, right? So my last name Mileto comes up, you understand, because I got adopted, right? So my last name Mileto comes up once again, all these different places. That's my last name, Mileto. You understand? So what we have to understand is that that's the type of information I dealt with before all that. Second, I got around to age 24. I completed Knowledge and Motion Ritual, and it looks like that's when Rockabarmil's Faulty Ritual has to do with the global quarantine. Rockabarmil's Faulty Ritual has to do with global quarantine. Okay, and the reason behind that has to do with the presence of what we refer to as the Moloch Network. Okay, that's what the Rockabarmil's Faulty Ritual has to do with, and it seems like the shamanistic knowledge of the mushroom ritual was hard for us to stomach. It was hard for us to deal with. It was hard for us to integrate, because we have to understand that the shamanistic heritage of the human race is something that has very much so been attacked, right? So we don't really many times have the knowledge of the shaman in modern secularized society, right? We don't really have the shamanistic elders to teach us about the real knowledge, the real information. Instead, we have orthodox religions, we have conventional history, understanding which is many times not only sugar-coated, but can be full of all different types of swaying. All right, because of whatever type of agenda. Now, it's actually the Anunnakis themselves that are giving us what we're calling the convoluted version of history. The Anunnakis are giving us our history, and I'm trying to actually explain the history of Anunnakis themselves, matter not. You understand, right? It's the Anunnakis that are giving us our history nowadays, and we're going to have a big problem with those versions of history. We're not going to be in agreement, okay, with the Anunnaki versions of history that they're giving us. Okay, we're going into pre-Diluvian timelines. We're going into galactic history timelines. Is what we're doing. We're not falling for the bullshit Anunnaki versions of history in conventional history class. Okay, because they're definitely not referring to advanced pre-Diluvian civilizations. They're still trying to kind of say that humanity was kind of primitive and all this other BS. We don't fall for that. We have the ascension forms. You understand, where the human race is descended from guardian Elohim races that are probably taking countless forms all across the multiverse for the last millions and millions of years. And matrices such as these are leftovers. This could be leftovers. There could be all different types of matrices that existed for the last many millions of years. All these different aspects of the Elohim races that humanity is descended from, all across the multiverse for the last however long. You know what I'm saying? There was probably all different types of advanced advanced worlds, you know what I'm saying, with the human seed, okay? And then Anunnakis have an agenda to control the human race a certain way, to many times go against that. So that's basically it for this video. Unfortunately, I pretty much just need to do a little bit of an overview of what the washer forms even is and what we deal with in the washer forms. But and we have to understand this ritual is going to continue. We have not completed the rocket bar means fallacy ritual yet. Right? So I want to thank you for being present in the washer forms. If you want to research a few of these things or contact me because I have a whole lot of other different information that I deal with that's related to all these concepts. But I have to put a little information out there what we actually deal with in the washer forms and who I even am and the type of information that we deal with. So I want to thank you for being present in the washer forms. This is Haddad. I go by Haddad below on this channel. This is probably the first video I've done. I would say at least like 2 years, okay? Because I had after dealing with this, and I haven't completed this ritual yet. Took a big break, you know what I'm saying? Because I had a lot of learning to do myself. You know what I'm saying? I had to figure out what the hell I'm dealing with these two rituals. This ritual turning into this ritual, which is not complete yet. So stay tuned in the washer forums. Thank you for being present for the broadcast.